So are we going to see if we can be done in 1 hour? We are, yes. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order.
Rodriguez?
Here.
Brenner?
Here.
Ogabo?
Here.
Levi?
Present.
Haverfield?
Here.
Scott?
Here.
Okay, as we begin our meeting today, and since we're entering into our council meeting, we'll do the invocation and all that stuff later. But for this meeting, I just want a clarification. This is a workshop, correct?
That's correct.
Information only, no action items, right? Okay, I don't see any here, so I thought I'll just double check. Tom, you're going to start us, right?
I'm going to start us off, Mayor. So
Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate your time, Mayor, Council. We have an hour to go through this workshop. Please ask questions along the way. This is no action item. We'll review this information that's in your packet. We'll be back in November for adoption. We're specifically talking about the transportation master plan and the bike and pedestrian plan. The team's put a lot of work into this, and they did a good job and got a tremendous amount of feedback, especially on the bike and ped plan. So how did we get here to start with? So if you remember, Mayor's done some surveys about what the citizens would like to see, and they've come back 2 times now with streets, public safety, and parks. So Our job, after we heard that, was to develop a plan on what projects were needed and wanted, and then also how to fund it. So this is from one of the original surveys. Would you support additional funding for roads? And this includes bike and ped, and 80% said yes. And then how would you like to fund it? The majority said impact fees, and the next one was a registration fee, which Jeff will talk a little bit about that. So that's kind of sets the stage work of how we're at, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff now to talk specifics about the transportation plan.
Mayor and councilors, thanks for your time this afternoon. Exciting times in Nampa. We have two major transportation master plans coming to you today. We have the transportation master plan and then the bicycle and pedestrian master plan. So just talking to Susan over there, and we'll be able to see how we do after 20 years from now when we look back. But now we have a plan in place, that kind of a roadmap on where steering us in the right direction. So we have some challenges before us, but we also have some opportunities to meet those challenges. I first of all want to introduce the team on the transportation master plan. Claire Bowman was our lead and principal project manager on it. He's a senior planner here. He's been at the city for 11 years and really an amazing asset. So I just wanted to recognize him. He oversaw Compass as a director there for, I think, 20 years. And so he's an ambassador for the city, and so I just wanted to recognize him and thank him for his work. Also, Parametrics. We work with a lot of engineering firms in the area, and we get to choose and select which engineers we work with, and I feel like we have great consultants working for the city of Nampa. So Parametrics being one of them. Susan Devine is here. She's a senior consultant, and she'll be presenting today. I also want to say we had much community involvement and interaction, and we wanted input from the get-go. We had 3 community meetings, and I just kind of want to list off quickly who was at these meetings. We had elected officials that were invited, bike and pedestrian committee members, emergency responders, educators, top employers, citizens, media, local jurisdictions like Compass and ITD, and the mayor specifically. She sent out 420-some invites to be on these open house meetings. And so we had 3. We had great support and input at those meetings, and that helped to develop this plan. So with that, I also want to say that Planning and Zoning Commission is here, and they are part of this conversation as they're involved in the planning and implementation of these. And so I want to welcome them and thank them for being here today also. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan Devine from Parametrics Engineering.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to put my phone here, not because I'm expecting a call, but so I don't talk too long. I could talk about this all day, but I know you don't want to, so we won't. But it is exciting to be here. It's a culmination of a lot of public outreach and process that we've spent really looking into the transportation system and growth, population and jobs. And so we'll give you a brief summary of that today. I'm going to put these on. I won't be able to see you, but I will be able to read my notes. Why did we do this plan? Well, the last plan was done in 2012, and as everyone sitting up there well knows, and everyone in the audience, a lot has happened since then. In fact, the major growth of residential employment and industrial populations, both jobs and actual population, have changed a lot of things, not only the traffic patterns, but also the kinds of traffic that are coming to the city, and whether this traffic is within the city or to and through the city. So we had to look at some of those things, and we needed to make sure that the infrastructure for transportation is keeping up with all of that. So the purpose of the plan, first of all, is to update the outdated plan. The last plan was done, as I said, in 2012, and our growth projections that we get from Compass show 107,000 in 2017, increasing to over 160,000 by 2040. That's well over a 50% population increase. So our plan has to take that into account. The new traffic pattern, as I said, there's a lot of, quote, to and through traffic, but there's also a lot of stuff happening at the edges, which is really important, and that's a theme that we see coming back both in the population growth and also in employment growth. So it's really important to start looking at precisely where is that population coming, and how and where do they need to go. We also looked at revised funding expectations, and I usually call it doing more with less and doing it differently. It's a whole different ball game now in terms of how we're going to fund transportation improvements. It's really challenging. It involves a big pie and a lot of pieces of pie and a lot of ways of sort of taking that one bite at a time. And Jeff's going to talk more about that when I'm done. So we took all that data and we developed a long-range transportation plan that prioritizes improvements. It looks at all modes. It looks at capacity for roads and intersections. It looks at safety, bike and ped, which again was sort of a concurrent pathway, and they're going to talk more about that plan. It reflects what's being done for public transportation. And then also freight mobility is a really big issue, both in terms of making sure that the facilities are large enough and safe enough for truck and car interaction, but also looking at where the manufacturing growth is taking place and how we could look at different truck routes. And then we compile all of that, and what we feel that we've provided is a transportation plan that's readable and approachable and understandable by the citizens of Nampa. It's not written in a highly technical fashion, although it takes technical data and tries to condense it down into the so what factors. So not only do we have a transportation master plan, we also developed an executive summary, which I believe you got in your packets. And that is about a 15-page summary with graphics and tables and pie charts, that if you could just read that, or if folks just understood that, they would really get a sense of what's happening in Nampa and what's to come. So again, the process, we started back in spring of 2018, and we take the data that was provided by Compass. They look at the patterns of population growth and land use and compile that and provide it to us. They look at traffic volumes on the roadways, and then they also look at and provide to us what the different regional entities are proposing for improvements within that network. As Jeff said, over 400 invitations were sent out to that first workshop. And over the course of all three, we had over 160 participants. So that's great. That's a great turnout and a great level of indicator of interest of what folks are seeing out there. So what did they tell us? Well, the good news is, here's all the things that folks think are working well. Roundabouts. This city is one of the premier cities for promoting and providing roundabouts as a effective, efficient, safe form of intersection control, and people like it. There was a lot of support for that, which isn't always the case in other cities, so that's great to see. People feel like that in general the bike and pedestrian infrastructure is working well, and that there is good improvement and maintenance on those primary arterials. So that's the good news. On the flip side, what is not working well, those things are congestion and delays, the things that you would expect to see here, public transportation, trucks through downtown, and access to I-84. Well, the great thing about the bad news is that is precisely the items that we dealt with in the transportation plan. So it was really good to just get that feedback and sort of bolster support for the kind of work that we were doing in the transportation plan, was to address each one of these 4 items. So before I talk about that colored diagram that you see there, I want to talk a little bit more about the vision and the future of Nampa that is contemplated in this transportation plan. The transportation plan is really just a result of planned growth and land use planning. So all of that gets compiled and it turns into people and trips to grocery stores and people trying to get to work at hospitals, and all of that turns into congestion and delay and people on roads. So we are just taking those projections and looking at what does that mean during the day, what does it mean during the peak hour. Again, as I said, there's a 50% population growth expected between 2017 and 2040, and a 67% job growth expected by 2040. That's over 70,000 jobs by 2040, which is the size of Nampa when I first started working in Nampa. So that's just jobs, future jobs. Today there's about 30,000. And again, these numbers are provided by Compass, so they may be a little different than the numbers that you have in front of you. But regardless, that's a significant amount of growth, and it means we have to address that. The other thing I thought was very interesting in this plan was, or in the data, is that while population is expected to grow, the number of households is expected to grow even higher. So that means smaller family units living in more numbers of a greater number of homes. So that is a big demographic shift away from households that might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 down to 1 and 2, and that means more cars per household on the roads. So all of those things are really interesting, and it also happens to be that most of that growth is at the edges, as I talked about before. A lot of pressure on the urban edges. So we have to look at how our traffic and our facilities line up with our regional neighbors and partners. The primary jobs that are expected to continue to grow are in retail, healthcare, and manufacturing. Again, they all provide different trends and patterns to your traffic. Those are not necessarily 9 to 5 type of jobs. In fact, some of them are 24/7, like healthcare, and others, manufacturing and industry, involve trucks. So all of those things start to tell a story about the type of transportation you're providing and when it peaks and when it flows, and how to provide the types of facilities to balance safety and capacity in moving through cars and people. So now, looking at the map, this is a summary again of the document that you have, and even the executive summary provides tables by horizon year. The planning horizon year is 2040, but we looked at 4 other sort of stop points along the way, so we had some milestones for planning. Because there's so much is changing by 2040, we really need to look at it in 5-year increments. But these projects are all color-coded by type. There's capacity and safety projects for both intersections and roadways. There's bike and pedestrian, and then freight mobility, which is shown there in blue. And another interesting data point is that about 70% of the improvements needed, both by number and more importantly by dollar, are addressing capacity issues. So that just tells you that most of those, which are the greater number of red up there, are dealing with adding lanes or adding safety turn lanes or other improvements at intersections. So again, 70% have a capacity foundation. Again, the traffic data and projections provided by Compass tell us that the city is growing, the region around us is growing, the way people will commute to and through and within Nampa is changing, and we feel that our plan has captured those trends and tendencies for the city. And there also looks at connectivity on corridors. So we got pretty far through the plan and then realized we really needed to go back and do another look at some of the regional corridors and connections, including Highway 16 and where that might land or not land, and how we would address that, as well as the downtown rerouting and how that might look. So we went back and did a little more work on corridors and connectivity and made sure that the plan highlights that as an important element as well. So when you get through all of that and you break out all of these projects by year of need, you end up with a total of about 141 projects on the transportation network that meet our criteria, which is to maintain a level of service D. And that is going to cost in excess of $530 million. And the best part about my job is when I turn it over to Jeff, and we work on financing strategies, and he's going to talk a little bit more about all the homework and background that we've been doing on gathering up funding and implementation strategies.
Okay, thank you. So if you look at these numbers, they're enormous. But there are strategies that we have in place to kind of take small bites towards the goal. So I want to let you know where we're at with that. First of all, we have a funding plan that we've established, and we are well underway with the plan. It's 3 phases. The first phase was to look at how growth pays for growth, and that was our impact fees. The impact fees were approved in March, and thank you for supporting that. And we had a 6 times improvement in our transportation costs. And what's happening now is that money's starting to come in. So we're already starting to see the benefit of that phase one of the implementation. And part of this funding plan was also, as part of the budget year FY '20, was the 1% allocated to transportation. So if you look at phase one, we're well underway, and then there's phase two and there's phase three. Phase one, I talked a little bit about the development impact fees, and I'm going to show you specifically where that money is being used. And depending on how fast we progress with the funding plan, depending on that, you'll see these projects increase in the schedules, and building them will increase. And also, there is approximately $40 million worth of improvements over the next 10 years. And the impact fees that were determined, we got as part of this transportation master plan. And we were using this even a year ago as the data started to come in. And so all of this list of projects that we have in our impact fees and our transportation master plan, we have been already utilizing those as a staff. And Claire and I were talking about how useful that is to us right now for planning. There's the property tax increase adjustment, 1% for this year, which is about $350,000 annually. Now, launching the plan, if you could pick those intersections around the city that people would call us on, and I get those calls frequently, and I'll just mention like Midland and Lake Lowell. People have been wanting that for years. That's on this list. We have a contract to finish the design on that and to construct that hopefully this year. You have the Kings and Victory intersection, which they're having like 40-car backups there at that four-way stop. You have other intersections around such as Idaho Center and Cherry. And with all the expansion in that area, it's important for us to look at those type of intersections that are going to grow, or that area is going to expand. So this is what's happening as the funding plan is being launched. We're actually seeing progress. So there's 14 total intersections that are underway right now. And part of the funding plan is we wanted it to be attainable. We wanted to give options to decision makers that this actually could be done. We want it to be equitable. Everybody that uses the system pays a fair share of that. We wanted it to be incremental. We understand we're in year-to-year budgeting, and budgeting for public sector is different. And we wanted it to be looking for cost savings. Sometimes this one's left off any funding list. So we're looking at cost savings every year. This year we saved over $300,000 in our operations of our streets, and Dawn and Jeff are here from our streets department. As a result, we put that back into the system. We're almost doubling our chip seal in residential areas next year in the zone. So that's huge for us. So we're already starting to see movement in launching the plan. Phase two, we are in the process of getting it off the ground. And the first part of that is the registration fees. And we have developed a memorandum of understanding, and we have distributed it to a few of the highway districts to take a look at. Actually, all the highway districts have it now as a draft document. We will be presenting it to you too. We're going to work out the details. Part of that is there's two ways to get on the ballot for a registration fee increase in Canyon County. One is for the highway districts to be in agreement and sign an agreement, and it will be put on the ballot. The other way is to go through the commissioners. And so we want to go through and get support from all the entities in Canyon County. And so we are proceeding with that. Further discussions over the next 2 months with the MOU, and we'll be coming back with more information on that. If that is approved at $25 per vehicle, it will be about $1.8 million per year in increase to our transportation funding. It's very important to other cities, especially smaller cities in Canyon County. We're finding that this will be very helpful for their budgets as well. And then phase three, we want to look at in the future of stormwater funding and support state gas tax and some of the things that are going on statewide and tell them of our needs in the city of Nampa. So as you can see, we're already working the plan. We would like you to your comments on it. It's a huge document. So if you saw, there's like several hundred pages in there. Susan mentioned the executive summary, and then the middle portion is the actual document, and then there's appendices, and it includes all the data that they gathered as part of that. But we would certainly be open to any comments you might have, and then we want to take it back in the first meeting in November for adoption. And we're covering a lot of material in a short amount of time. Also, if you have any questions, we'll meet with you personally. If there's any more data or any more information you need. With that, I'll stand for questions. We'll stand for questions.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
fellow council members, I know on this plan, we've looked at it a few times, and I am very proud of this plan, and I bragged about it at lunch today to someone I had lunch. They said, well, what do you like that's happened in the city in the last 6 years you've served? And I talked about the streets plan in particular. I'm very proud of it. You've all done the work, so kudos. There's just one little hiccup in there, and you might know what it is, and that's the request for foregone at one point. We talked about it before, and fellow council members, you'll still get there, just not as quickly with taking that foregone. So when I'm out here sitting with Hubert Osborne, and that time comes up, I'll be saying, don't take the foregone, please. So that's my comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Kling, quick question for you in regard to safety, existing intersections. I jumped ahead to the executive summary, and I'm looking at the beginnings of maybe there's more information provided there as far as crash data. At what point, and I assume when you're talking about partners and different agencies, that's I'm looking at an ITD corridor on 3rd Street coming to 16th. 16th has become a major road system to get out of town. A lot of people shoot on 16th to get to Garrity on out to the freeway. At the intersection of 3rd and 16th is an example of an intersection I know well because my office is on that corner. The number of accidents, either with pedestrians in a crosswalk, a gentleman was hit about a month ago in the crosswalk, hurt very badly. There was an actual crash this morning right in front of my office. A lady driving her 2 grandkids to school was overturned by a car that hit her. I'm just wondering, at what point in time does safety of an intersection become a priority as far as in a lot of the dialogue with whether it's the signalization, different things that might need to happen to govern the traffic going through that intersection in general?
In regards to that intersection specifically, 16th did show a higher level of accidents. We submitted for a grant 5 years ago, and that's when those signal upgrades came along there, and we updated that signal there with head ramps, and we're still tracking it. So it's a continual, we check crash data every year. We'll continue and take a look at it now based on your responses too, but 16's been on our radar. If there is corridor improvements that need to be made, there are grants right now we can pursue, but there's also, now that the funding increase are there, we can do some other things internally with our own budget to try to improve those roadways. But
Yeah, please look at that intersection because you have one-way traffic headed east in 3 lanes that are 2 of them try to turn left at that intersection, which means the center turn lane, people crossing that have the right-of-way are not being seen, and that's the gentleman that got hit. But just in the last 2 months, there's been 4 accidents at that intersection. That's abnormal, that many, but I think it's because of the amount of traffic being generated through town to 16th to try to get out to Garrity, and so it's quite a bit of traffic. I think there needs to be some scrutiny on how the signals are either set up, the timing, even if you need to slow down the traffic pace as it goes through that intersection. Something needs to be done. So anyway.
Councilman Haverfield, we'll take a look at that, and then there's a lot of bypass traffic going on 16th now.
Right, and through on 3rd. So
Mayor Kling. Jeff, the new intersections that have the traffic lights. But for example, let's go to Lone Star in Midland. Then you have another one at Roosevelt in Midland, and those intersections run pretty smoothly, and I'm impressed with those 2. But then you get to Lake Lowell, and then you get to Iowa, and they're terrible. And cars are backed up almost a quarter of a mile, either way, all sides. So I'm wondering the importance of who's the priority here. One is Kings and Victory. That's a terrible intersection, and I don't know, is this the number 1? Is that why it's at the top?
Not
Or just by the
necessarily
list?
in order of priority.
Oh, I see.
They were just, that's, you can look at that as a list of projects, and some of them, there's opportunity factors, some, we have more right-of-way than we have on other ones. But corridor you're talking about is a priority.
Okay,
Lake
good.
Lowell,
good.
Midland, Lake Lowell, and Midland, Iowa are both priorities.
But I think the one that we, in our past council hearings, that there's going to be a roundabout at Greenhurst and Midland, is that right? But then that, or is it some kind of four-way traffic light, whatever it's going to be, but it's not until 2035, right?
Greenhurst, and I think it was Middleton was at a council meeting, I believe,
Mhm.
when we were
Right,
talking
okay.
about, then that one is off. There's some that, because of the growth around the perimeter of the city, and that's what part of this master plan is talking about, we're seeing some of these smaller intersections at capacity all of a sudden, and these four-way stops are needing a signalized intersection when we haven't caught up on the interior intersections yet. So that's part of these is getting caught up on the ones that need it now.
And this complete funding that you have going,
So yeah, thank you for that question, Councilman. This is not complete funding. This will get into concept design and right-of-way acquisition. And like I said, as the funding continues to come in, that's how fast we can progress towards this plan. If phase two continues to roll, we're looking at as many as 4 signals potentially a year as we get going. But if we have to step back because of the funding plan, then we'll have to pare that back.
okay, thank you.
How are we doing? Great. Is there any other questions?
Right. Thank you. I really appreciate the tremendous work that's gone into this from everyone that's been here. It's been a long time. Thank you. I also wanted to say thank you to our planning and zoning. Really appreciate you guys being here. So thank you so much, all of you.
Just a final comment. So we're going to focus on safety, the economy. We want our economy to boom. Transportation is part of that. Livability. We want to be able to walk to the store, feel safe walking on a road, and also mobility. Those are the things we're going to highlight in this plan and focus on. So with that, we're going to move on in the second half an hour, and I appreciate moving through a lot of information pretty quickly. So this is our bicycle and our pedestrian master plan. I want to, first of all, I want to introduce the team who worked very hard on this. The 2012 master plan, the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, one of our most successful plans. I mean, we use it as much as any of them. I want to highlight our Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and right now our chair is Larita Shandorf and our vice chair is Phil Peterson, and they've been great leaders, and I know the group in itself has been outstanding for moving $15 to $20 million worth of work in the last 7 to 8 years. So I want to thank them. Also, a steering committee was established as part of this. And the steering committee was made up of Safe Routes to Schools representatives, Compass folks. The irrigation districts came, which was fantastic. I'm starting to see a lot of irrigation district personnel in and out of the building, and we're working with them very closely on a number of areas. The Canyon County Development Service was here, Nampa School District, ITD, and like I said, the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So one of the persons that really worked hard was Christy Watkins, and she's from the senior planner from our planning department. She was great, outstanding, and really was a project manager on this. So she is going to give an overview of the Bike and Pedestrian Master Plan.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Planning and Zoning Commissioners. Thank you for attending. So I'll start with a little bit of history. In 2010, the City of Nampa received an energy efficiency block grant to complete the bicycle and pedestrian master plan for the city, the very first one that we ever had. And along with the implementation of that plan, then there were projects outlined there, and we also had some money to complete some of those projects as well. $15 million in projects have been completed since its adoption in September of 2011. Now it's time to update this plan and expand our project list so that we can pursue further funding opportunities and continue to coordinate with the asset management schedule that we have in place, and to coordinate with the various plans that exist regionally and connect with our neighbors. So that would include Lake Lowell, Caldwell, Meridian. We tried our best in our recommended map to coordinate with their plans that they already have in place and to match up with what they're planning to do. We are revising the design standards to be more consistent with the construction standards that are already being applied by the engineering department, and vice versa as they update their standards to match our plan. As we continue to apply for grants and other funding opportunities, and as the culture of the nation and the city changes, we need to remember that our projects have a greater chance of being funded if they show connectivity to a broader base of people and provide more transportation options. We have been very efficient in our process for this update, as it has only taken us 6 months to get through it. The public was involved throughout. We've had 2 steering committee meetings and 1 open house, as well as a web map that was available to the community to provide online input. And we received over 384 survey responses and comments back on that map. So that was an incredible amount of input. Our consultants at Alta were very impressed with the number of people that responded. From April to October of this year, we have evaluated the public input and the existing conditions. We've determined new goals and simplified the vision statement from the previous plan. And we have received a new list of recommended projects and design guidelines. After this workshop, we will send our edits back to the consultant and have this plan ready for adoption in November, along with the transportation plan. After adoption, we will be posting a story map on our website that will walk you through our process and show the portions of the adopted plan, as well as a final map of recommended projects. We will have a link for that story map that we will show you here at the end. So our strategies going forward include using the project cut sheets that are in the plan and the list of recommended projects to determine the next projects that we will pursue funding for. The project cut sheets in the plan are intended to be grant-ready design pages to add simplicity to that process. We want to have a guiding document to provide our developers in the community to be sure that they align their planned facilities with those facilities that are in our map and on our recommended network. These will include pathways, sidewalks, and even some bike lanes in some cases, depending on where they're located, and to make sure that they construct the new facilities according to those design guidelines that will be adopted. We've also been working closely with ITD and the irrigation districts, as Jeff mentioned. This will include partnering with them on some of our facilities that we share some joint jurisdiction. And this can also mean sharing some costs for improvements, negotiating easements, building bridges, or even partnering on some funding opportunities. Nampa already has a master agreement with the Nampa and Meridian Irrigation District, and we are working with Pioneer Irrigation District on case-by-case basis as their needs and abilities change depending on the locations where our projects are located. So when we started in 2010, we had 1 manually activated pedestrian crossing on 11th Avenue, 1 bike lane on the Karcher overpass that was installed by ITD, and a few miles of constructed pathway. Since then, we have installed bike lanes on 16th Avenue, extended the bike lanes on Karcher Road to Middleton Road, added bike lanes on Caldwell Boulevard going west to Caldwell, and had some development projects that have installed bike lanes on Midland Boulevard by the hospital and Madison Avenue by the new high school. We have installed wayfinding signs and pavement markings for various bicycle boulevards throughout the city. These pictures are from the very first one that we opened with a street fair event on 18th Avenue. Goes from Roosevelt to 2nd Street South. So with those types of projects, we've had many, many miles of pathway that we have completed as well. So I would like to welcome Cody Swander from the Parks Department to describe some of those projects for you.
Thank you, Christy. It's my pleasure to speak to everybody this afternoon about some of the exciting aspects of the off-street pathways that have come about because of the 2011 plan and what we've done in the last 8 years with that plan, and then also kind of step into looking forward with the new plan that's up for adoption here this year and looking at the off-street improvements. As Christy said, there's been a lot of bike boulevards, bicycle lanes in the street, but what's been done on the off-road, on some of the off-road pathways, and there's been quite a bit. Oh, 14 miles of, roughly 14 miles of paved pathways exist in our community now, and some of the highlights of those include a very welcome addition to Nampa's pathway system in 2014, which connected the Wilson pathway to the Stoddard pathway by tiling over the Partridge lateral, which was an open supply canal at the time. This almost 1 mile section was accomplished with cooperation from Nampa Meridian Irrigation Districts, and it gives users an east-west route from the existing Stoddard pathway into residential areas to the west. Coupled with the further development of the Wilson pathway to the west of the Fish and Game's Wilson Springs area, it connects to Sunny Ridge Road in 2012 for an uninterrupted pathway stretching almost 2 miles in length. And that picture is kind of the partridge on the bottom with the kids on the bike. Another section of pathway is the pedestrian pathway into downtown that was identified as a need for a long time. The first phase of that dream was accomplished in 2017, and beginning at 17th Avenue South, connecting to Lloyd Square Park. And it's short, only 1,000 feet of new off-street pathway, but it gives bicyclists and pedestrians a more dedicated route into the heart of downtown Nampa. And it has a lot of potential for future connections with the Stoddard pathway to the east, heading toward Northside Boulevard to the west. So even though it's a small connection at this point in time, it is going to be the heart and key of going in both directions to lead folks into Nampa's downtown. And the other one is getting out to the lake and enjoying Nampa's natural beauty, identified as our connection to the National Deer Flat Wildlife Refuge and Lake Lowell is the Edwards Pathway along the Edwards and Deer Flat Canal. Construction of the first portions of this Edwards Pathway between Midland and Middleton Road were completed in 2016. The pieces total about 1 mile in length, as this pathway was only possible due to the coordination with Nampa Meridian Irrigation District to allow public pathway along an open supply canal. And that was a first for Nampa, getting that in place. Moving on to signalized crossings. 16 improved crossings were installed in Nampa since 2011's adoption of that first bike and ped plan. The ones that are bulleted up there are crossings with off-street pathways. Some are on-street, like the photo show. Pathways are fun to ride and walk, but having a safe way to cross major roadways adds to the enjoyment and safety of any off-street pathways experience. Nampa has been very aggressive in upgrading pathway crossings across the city with 16 signalized crossings improvements, including some of these along the Wilson, Stoddard, Indian Creek pathways. Next, I'd like to talk about development-driven pathways. And a lot of times there's questions kind of regarding how this process works, but being dependent on city funding and grants cannot build all of Nampa's projected pathways. Rather, we rely on property deeded and dedicated to the city as development happens across the town. Many sections of pathway were built since the implementation of the bike plan in 2011 during the platting stages of residential and commercial development. And up on the screen are just some examples and some photographs of some areas that were deeded and dedicated to the city of Nampa as development, primarily residential development has happened, although there are some commercial developments that have participated, mostly by Broadmoor. And looking ahead at what we can expect from the update to the plan, many of these projects already have process in the works to start moving toward them. Over the last 8 years, we've accomplished a lot, and looking ahead over the next projected period of time, we anticipate a lot coming. I think most notably is the Stoddard pathway, and there's kind of a rendering diagram here showing what the pathway could look like from East Iowa heading north all the way to 2nd Street. And as council knows, that property is all under city ownership at that time, with future design work happening currently, and being successful in being awarded grants through the TAP program has made that possible in moving forward. Another one that's on the horizon is an extension to the Grimes pathway, which is in North Nampa along the Grimes drain, and moving forward with projected grant funds, both received and applied for this coming budget year to move that pathway out to 11th Avenue North Extension. Okay. With that, I'll turn this back over to Jeff.
So we have been using the list of projects they've had in that document for the last 8 years, 7 years. And we've depleted most of the priority projects in the original one. Now they have created a whole new list for us. And so, for instance, last year, we meet as a group, collaborate between departments, planning, parks, public works, engineering, and a number of other outside safe routes to school. The school districts comes, and we talk about what are these priority projects. Well, this plan helps us develop those. And last year, we submitted 2 Stoddard pathway grants for $500,000 each, and a Grimes pathway. It was a $1.5 million worth of improvements we obtained just from having the master plan in place. Because if we would turn in these grants without the master plan, it would not score well in this process. So this is key to us moving forward. The cool part about this plan is there's a lot of grants out there for multimodal. To be honest, sometimes more than maintenance. Our roads are kind of dilapidated sometimes, but there's funding out there for bike and ped, but we want to take advantage of that, and we have. And so this new list of projects in the updated plan is going to be super helpful for us moving forward. So also, I just want to mention we had all these hits on our online tool, but we had a progressive review of this document, which was great. So they would get a little bit done, they'd put it online, and people would, you might have got on the online tool and drawn a line on where you thought a pathway should go, or you were at a crossing, or where they saw an almost a near miss, an accident location or something that they noticed. So the community would provide this input, and then they would update the plan, and we would get back and get to work, and then they would submit an updated plan. So we had like 3 iterations of it, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, for us to get almost 400 hits online from the community is amazing. Sometimes we only get, on the master plan, we had, 100 plus come to a meeting, which was huge, but that's a citywide plan too. This was what Alta told us was one of the highest public involvement projects they've had. So that's very encouraging to know people are involved in it. The story map, if we could just go to it quickly. So I love this part of it. We do. There is a online tool now that has come out of this process that you can go to online. And you can click through the tabs up top. For instance, there's our vision and goals for the plan. You go to the next one, and it talks about some of the benefits of walking and biking, also some of the public outreach elements that we obtained when we went through the process. There are some of those, maybe those more dangerous places that people were concerned about, or places people wanted a pathway. And then you go to the facility types, and a lot of questions on, well, what the heck is a shared bike lane or something? Well, that information is right here on the story map. And then the final network recommendations is the map. So you can blow up and target areas for where the map is. We can refine this as we go. So very pleased with this part of it, and hope that you can kind of check this out when you get time. So with that, that is our transportation master plan and our bike and pedestrian master plan draft documents. We would appreciate your review. And like I said, we want to present those at the first meeting in November for adoption by the City Council. So with that, we'll stand for questions.
So Jeff, your process then, will you go to planning and zoning public hearing with these?
We were looking at this as a working meeting, and planning and zoning was invited, and so we were not planning on doing that, Mayor.
Okay, so does this need to go to public hearing before P and Z, or just?
From my understanding, it does not. And Danny, that's my understanding.
Okay. So it's a public hearing before council then, is that correct? Or is it not a public hearing, is it just adoption?
As far as, from my understanding, it's just adoption of the documents by City Council.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
thank you. Jeff, thank you to you and your team, and Christy, thank you. And Larita, a big thank you to you and the advisory committee. You guys have worked tirelessly, and the effort that Larita, I know, has driven this is just incredible. And one of the comments I continually hear in the community is they cannot wait until we have connectivity with our paths, because people want to go out and they want to enjoy the whole city and not worry about Puncture Vine or anything like that, or taking a stroll with their family in the evening. So this is very exciting to hear.
It's pretty cool. They started with one bike lane, and it was on the Karcher overpass. That was it. That's when Larita, I think that's when the group started. So yeah, they've come a long ways. Pretty great.
Are there any other comments?
Yeah, Jeff, just a question for the mechanism for dealing with, there's no plan to deal with uncontrolled intersections, right?
Uncontrolled intersections are typically in like neighborhood, lower volume roadways. And then if volumes increase, we would do a traffic study to whether it warrants a stop controlled intersection. Beyond that, it would be a signalized intersection. So typically, neighborhood uncontrolled intersections are that way until volumes increase. Safety is also a consideration at those locations.
Okay.
So,
I know it might seem self-serving, but again, the intersection, I know there's a volume count, but the one where the new building is, where the bank was that you have by Central Elementary, where our church is on that corner, I've seen crashes and many near misses because people are starting to use that as a passway, kind of to cut through to 16 off 12th. And they're going through there pretty fast. And there's a Papa John's Pizza. The delivery drivers go through there pretty fast. And there's a school there with kids walking at that corner. And I see them cross with trepidation and fear because there's no anticipation anyone's going to stop because there's no stop sign. So it's kind of like you kind of got to step out in the road so a car sees you and wait for them to stop before you proceed. And so the concern is more the volume of kids, the hundreds of young elementary kids that are walking across the street there without stop signs on any of those corners. So just my plug for that.
Councilman Ogbu, yeah, so there could be increasing volume on that main line, and that's something we can look at and get back to you on that intersection.
I was just there today, and you're right. You have to be really careful going through there, but because it is a school, it'd be definitely a place to look. I had forgotten to also mention Loretta and her work earlier when I acknowledged the planning and zoning, and something that is a project, and this is a little different than our plan, but it's the bike project. It's an amazing project, and a lot of work goes into providing those in our community with bikes that need them. And Loretta, thank you for your work and the rest of the team there. And so it's a great thing when we need paths, right? But what I appreciate in our plan is the connectivity in neighborhoods and ensuring through the planning and zoning process when we have new neighborhoods coming, especially infill, that there's connectivity. And sometimes I think developers are hesitant to go ahead and do that, but it's important for our community, for the livability of our community. And so I really appreciate the efforts getting us connected. So thank you.
Okay.
Are there any questions, any further questions or comments from council? You've done great work. It's been a lot of work, and I'm very impressed with how quickly you went through this. So thank you for doing so and taking the opportunity.
We certainly appreciate the council and the mayor's support. So, and I think I speak for the big team in this room that made everything happen. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. So I guess at that, this is the conclusion of this particular meeting. Is that right? You've completed your agenda and you did
you
that
have
so
a break
quickly.
until 6 o'clock.
Thank you for providing sandwiches. Thank you. So for council, unless there are any further comments or questions, I would stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And we will reconvene at 6 o'clock for our council.